Uh, Thank you very much for joining the second webinar of International Group of Eminent Persons for a World Without Nuclear Weapons. Today, we have the speakers who are very much kind of knowledgeable about this issue and also who have very much first-hand information on what's really going on the ground about nuclear disarmament, nuclear risk reduction, and so forth. So let me begin by saying a couple of disclaimers or, kind of a announcement. One, so, at the second half of this webinar, we are going to have a kind of discussion. I would like to engage the participants. So if you have any questions, please press the Q&A button and open the chat box. Then you please write your question. Then we are going to pick up some of them and then have a discussion among the panelists. And also, secondly, please note that this webinar will be recorded and made available at the Japan Institute of International Affairs website at a later date. So I hope you understand it. My name is Nobu Akiyama at the Japan Institute of International Affairs and also a member of the IGEP, the International Group of Eminent Persons for a World Without Nuclear Weapons, and I'll be moderating this session. Before we begin, I would like to invite Director General Kimitake Nakamura of Japan's Foreign Ministry. So Nakamura-san, please.
Thank you, Professor Akiyama. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Kimi Nakamura from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Director General in charge of the Disarmament Affairs. On behalf of my government, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to all participants joining us today from around the world for this second IGEP webinar. Also, I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers. The International Group of Eminent Persons for a World Without Nuclear Weapons, IGEP, was launched by Japan in 2022. Although this framework was established by the government, the discussions within the group has been conducted entirely independently and freely, without any direction from the Japanese government. This independence has been essential in enabling genuinely open, candid, and constructive exchanges. Through a total of 6 meetings, the group brought together participants from both nuclear weapon and non-nuclear weapon states, as well as from countries inside and outside the TPNW framework. They engaged in discussions that transcended their respective national positions and emerged. They finalized concrete recommendations for achieving a world without nuclear weapons. I understand that these recommendations were crafted with the 2026 NPT review conference firmly in mind. As we look forward that important milestone, today's webinar serves as a valuable opportunity to deepen our dialogue on key issues such as the engagement of scientific and technical experts on nuclear disarmament verification, nuclear risk reduction, and bridge building between disarmament and security. Japan hopes that today's exchange will contribute to strengthening international momentum for nuclear disarmament. I very much look forward to the rich and substantive discussions ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nakamura-san, for kind words to the IGEP work. Now, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists. So, can you see the slides? Right. So, we have 2 members from IGEP, and then also 2 experts from outside of the group. So Rose Gottemera and Gustav Slavinen, who are actively participated in the discussion, and they are central to the work of crafting our final report, and they are going to pick up a couple of interesting issues and share their thoughts about what's going on in the world and how this our work would be relevant. And then also we have two experts, Mr. Marcelo Camara, DG from Foreign Ministry of Brazil, and also Olamide Samuel, who is also a researcher at the nuclear and open nuclear network. They also share their thoughts, and maybe hopefully they have read our papers and they have own sort of comments. At the same time, they also would like to share their thoughts on the current the trend on nuclear disarmament and arms control. So. First of all, I would like to introduce a couple of key points of our report. So our work is finished, March this year. Then published a report titled "Stepping Back from a Nuclear Precipice." This title is pretty much driven by the sense of urgency that we are at the edge of potential nuclear catastrophe. So we justify our work by being aware of the nuclear risk or risk of nuclear war is higher than at any time in the recent decades, and also the geopolitical tensions are escalating, and then we are witnessing the erosion of arms control norms and also the regimes. But in the meantime, there are some trends that the humanitarian concerns on nuclear weapons rising, and I think one of the symbolic event was the Nihon Hidankyo's Nobel Peace Prize, which was awarded at the end of last year's Nobel Peace Prize. So then also now our urgent issue is how to uphold the international nuclear regime, which is based upon the NPT. And next year we have an NPT review conference that is which is we are mandated to make it successful. And so in our report, we have three parts. First one is core principles. So for example, very basic ideas to maintain our international order, and important one first, it is important to uphold the idea of adherence to international law, including the UN Charter and the international humanitarian law. Secondly, we should recognize a shared responsibility. And thirdly, I think we need to commit to the culture of dialogue or habit of dialogue, and we should engage each other in order to reinforce the multilateral nuclear non-proliferation regime. And also, we need to be aware of rapid change, which is posed by the innovations. So we have to make sure our adaptability to the technological changes and the new risks. So finally, keep working to move away from a nuclear deterrence as a final. So we should recognize that nuclear deterrence should not be the final form or ultimate form of our security. So at least we have to make some efforts to do so. And then we also kind of listed the maybe three areas which requires urgent actions. First one is, of course, to prevent a nuclear war. And second is to stop nuclear arms race and proliferation. And third is work for how to make the 2026 review conference as constructive as possible. And I think the link to our report was in the chat box, so please refer some details. And finally, I think we come back to the basics. That is, we should have a willingness to act and collectively in order to uphold our kind of a shared public goods, which is the non-proliferation regime. And it is our hope, IJEP's hope, that we are able to inspire the international community to further engage in the dialogue. Of course, we have some ideas or actions, but at the same time, our hope is that our discussion will stimulate, the constructive discussion to further, bring up new ideas, how to uphold the international regime for non-proliferation at the same time, taking some actions for the risk reductions. So this is kind of really rough outlines of our paper. But so now I would like to ask, our members of the IJEP to share their ideas and thoughts. So now maybe can I ask Rose, could you start?
Yes, of course. And thank you, Mr. Akiyama Nobu. It's been a great honor to participate in this international group of eminent persons, and truly a pleasure to work with colleagues both in Japan and from across the world. I hope you noted how wide-ranging the membership was, not only from states possessing nuclear weapons, but also from many other parts of the world. And it was really a wonderful conversation and a difficult one at times, but I think very, very worthwhile. So I commend the government of Japan for supporting this important effort. I really wanted to make 2 points today based on 2 of our main recommendations, and I'll just quote them briefly in turn as I talk about what I think the priorities for U.S. policy should be at this moment. And there's no question that our current president is both interested in nuclear arms control and very focused on it as a priority of his policy, but also he has many other policy priorities, including at the moment a very intensive negotiation to try to halt Russia's aggression against Ukraine. So it's a matter of dueling priorities, I think, and it's important to bring these issues to his attention and that of his administration, which is why I think that this current moment is one to focus quite squarely on one of the recommendations in the study, which is Russia and the United States engage in strategic dialogue and keep new strategic arms reduction treaty limits, that is, New START limits, while negotiating a follow-on framework for arms control. This is precisely the idea that Vladimir Putin put on the table a couple of months ago to essentially maintain the limits of the New START treaty on the basis of a political agreement after the treaty goes out of force in February of 2026, just barely 2 months from today. And so I do think that there is great potential to work this. I know the U.S. government is continuing to consider this matter actively. I was just in Washington yesterday, and this was a very active discussion among my government colleagues there. But I would like to say, too, that we don't need to overthink this. It's very easy to make a political handshake, so to say. There doesn't need to be a complex negotiation to extend the limits of New START. So I've been urging people just to think of it as a direct and straightforward way to keep the limits of the treaty in place for the next year through the NPT review conference, and then also with the goal of beginning a new negotiation for future limitations. Furthermore, I'm publishing today a piece in the Arms Control Today magazine that will say that it's also quite easy to turn back on the implementation measures of the treaty, at least while the treaty remains in force in November, December, and January. And that is because the treaty implementation was paused by President Putin due to his linkage of the matter to the war in Ukraine. And I think it's quite easy to turn the treaty back on again in terms of on-site inspections, in terms of data exchanges, and in terms of exchanges of notification. The treaty itself provides the legal superstructure to do that. And so it's a matter of flipping a switch. No negotiations are necessary. And so I think this is another very important point that should be considered. The second recommendation from the report I'd like to mention is upholding the moratorium on nuclear explosive testing and work harder to achieve entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and encourage nuclear weapon states to voluntarily provide unilateral or reciprocal transparent transparency at their nuclear testing sites. This is a very controversial issue at the moment in the United States. You have heard, of course, President Trump speak about the necessity of taking a new look at nuclear testing, and this has led to some deep and concerning discussion in the United States. In my view, it's absolutely necessary to uphold the moratorium on explosive nuclear testing, in my view. But there are those who argue in Washington that, in fact, there is not a common understanding among the P5 nuclear weapon states under the Non-Proliferation Treaty of what zero nuclear yield means. And so rather than throw out the baby with the bathwater, I am urging first that the P5 sit down together and go over the negotiating record of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and talk among themselves again to reconfirm, as I understand it, the mutual understanding of the meaning of zero yield under the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And second, we should be thinking about ways to confirm what others are doing, because the United States is very concerned about reciprocity, that other states possessing nuclear weapons, particularly Russia and China, are proceeding with some experiments that involve nuclear yield. And I think we can work together. There was a model from the joint verification experiment of the late 1980s, where the USSR and the United States worked together to reconfirm verification practices under the Threshold Test Ban Treaty. And that eventually led to the ratification and entry into force of the Threshold Test Ban Treaty in the early 1990s. So I do think there's an opportunity here for a kind of JVE2, a new joint verification experiment on a mutual and reciprocal basis in order to develop some mutual understanding of these important matters in the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So I think our recommendations in the IJEP final report are quite apropos to the current moment. I look forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Rose, for two important items, and maybe there are some questions from the audience as well. But if I have a chance, I would like to ask a couple of things. So now, Gustavo, Ambassador Gustavo Slavinen, would you mind giving your thoughts?
Thank you very much, Nobu. And again, like Rose Cotamola said, that it was an honor to be a member of the group. And my sincere thanks to the government of Japan for convening that group, and the support have done it to all members of the group. I think we have done a terrific job under the current circumstances. It was a challenging one. There were different views and perspectives, as Rose correctly pointed out. We were reflecting a wide array of positions, not from our governments, but at least, from the personal point of view, from nuclear weapon states, non-nuclear weapon states, and many others from the global south, from developed countries. I think this is a very interesting combination. The conclusions, recommendations reflect that variety of views. It's impossible to reach one single conclusion. But of the recommendations and conclusions of the report, I would like to address the one related to it's one of the urgent steps. Second, to stop nuclear arms raising and reduce proliferation risk, in particular the subparagraph Little Roman 11 about all states to work to bridge both the deterrence and disarmament perspective. I believe that this is crucial. Obviously, one may focus the discussions among the nuclear weapon states under the current crucial and dangerous times, obviously, where we as international community, we are again we have moved backwards after, all the positive developments in the late 90s and the 2000s. It seems to be that we moved back to, just during the Cold War times, or even worse, where there is an actual danger for the possible use of nuclear weapons, something that for 20 plus years we thought it was going to be impossible. But not only that, is the threat of use of nuclear weapons, and in particular, now back to the political preeminence of the relevance of nuclear deterrence. not only by those countries under the nuclear umbrella, but others that may consider that. We can discuss about nuclear sharings and others, but this is something that having, brought back to the forefront of our discussions. But in that context, coming from a non-nuclear weapon states and basically from the global south, I would like just to raise the point that we have to continue addressing the need to keep pushing for nuclear disarmament. At the end of the day, the group of the international group on eminent persons, the goal was about how to make recommendations to push back for a world free of nuclear weapons, which is nuclear disarmament. Obviously, many will say that this is not the right moment to push for that, but others, including myself, insist that yes, we have to continue, even it seems to be a very utopian perspective, but we have to, and that's why that recommendations that calling for all states, nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states, to start bridging both perspective of both that support deterrence and both who push for disarmament, because it's key in that conversation. At the end of the day, the report was targeted for the next NPT review conference next year, and it's exactly the treaty, the only treaty where you have both elements. Is the only one addressing nuclear disarmament that have been endorsed by at least 5 of the possessors states, but also includes non-proliferations as well as peaceful applications. This is the so-called grand bargain. So I think we should not lose perspective of those other elements and not only focus on nuclear deterrence or reducing the risk of use of nuclear weapons, which is very urgent, obviously, but we shouldn't miss the bigger picture, which is how we can continue as collectively pushing for nuclear disarmament as far as it could be, but we have to do it. And obviously, there are many elements in that recommendations, and obviously we have to discuss, regarding the consistencies of nuclear policies vis-a-vis international humanitarian law and others, the effects of nuclear war and many other related elements. But in particular, something I was just stressing throughout our conversations and discussions and in other fora is the need to engage both nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states on a very interactive dialogue, just to find common understandings on, for example, what means nuclear deterrence. Nuclear deterrence may mean something for the nuclear weapon states or for some nuclear weapon states, and it may mean something different from the non-nuclear weapon states, because non-nuclear weapon states, we don't have the expertise about nuclear deterrence. And there are many other elements from the technical point of view that maybe we need an open dialogue just to reach a common understanding of what we mean when we say something, and then how we achieve those things. So I'm going to stop now because I believe that will be quite interesting questions, and I will be ready to answer them. Thank you, Nobu.
Thank you very much. So you also raised the importance of building a bridge in the various stakeholders between those who advocate deterrence and also disarmament at the same time. We also talked about the importance of engaging both NPT community and TPNW community in a more kind of inclusive manner. So maybe at the next round, I might ask you how to do it. But before that, I would like to ask Marcelo to give your thoughts. Please.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I'd like to thank the organizers for this very honorable invitation to address such a distinguished panel. I'd like to commend the work of the eminent people. I think this reports will be quite useful for the next REPCON. Well, we are now 5 months away from the next REPCON. I think it is nobody's secret that this REPCON will take place against a very dim, I would say, geopolitical circumstances. We have 2 RevCons in a row without final document, and also 3 preparatory committees that were not able to approve a consensus document. So I think that we should perhaps work in areas that perhaps garner a great deal of, I would say, convergence among members, state parties of the NPT, both nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states. And one of the areas that I think that can, I would say, make advance in this RevCon is verification of nuclear disarmament. It has been, there has been in the last decade, many, I would say, initiatives devoted to nuclear disarmament verification. The first one was the UK-Norway. It was succeeded by the Quad, was United States, Sweden, Norway, and the UK. And then the administration Obama launched the International Partnership for Nuclear Disarmament Verification, the IPNV. So those initiatives, in my view, they were extremely useful to, I would say, advance scenarios how nuclear disarmament verification will be like. But there was one of the shortcomings of those initiatives is that they did not have the, I would say, multilateral credence that just the United Nations can bestow. So having participated in the 2 GGEs, group of governmental experts for nuclear disarmament verification, established by Norway 2017 to 2021, I came up with the idea of suggesting the creation, the establishment in the United Nations of a group of scientific and technical experts dedicated to nuclear disarmament verification. I'm very glad to report that this initiative was approved by the General Assembly on last Monday, December the 1st. So we have 170 votes in favor, 2 abstentions, and only 2, I would say, votes against. So I will perhaps very briefly touch upon the main drivers, the main inspiration for such a group, and also very briefly dwell on, say, the main tenets of this group. Well, the great inspiration was the group of scientific experts that worked for 20 years prior to the CTBT negotiations, where, group of seismologists gathered themselves in Geneva in 2 meetings of 2 weeks a year, and they work, trying to come up with a verification mechanism for a treating banning nuclear tests. I'd like to stress that group worked in a scenario in which there was no appetite for entering a legally binding instrument banning tests. This group was comprised from scientists and seismologists for all regions of the world, and it is noteworthy that the Soviet Union did not support this group at the beginning, but eventually Soviet Union sent, I'll say, technical people to join that group. Well, this the GST was created, as I told you, was established in the UN disarmament machinery last Monday, will be comprised of 21 members. They will act in their personal capacity, not representing states. They will be selected by UNOGA by the outstanding, I would say, scientific knowledge. That means that will not be comprised by diplomats, but by technical people. The GST will hold, let's say, 4 2-week sessions from 27 to 29. Their reports will not be legally binding, but the group should seek consensus as they will draft this report. I think our colleagues have already put this resolution at the disposal of all participants of this webinar. So I will stop here. I will be glad to react to any question related to this group. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think this is also an important initiative that the Brazilian government led, and I think there are something in common with what Rod said about the importance of verification in kind of upholding a moratorium on nuclear the explosive tests. So maybe we may have something in common. I would like to further explore that point as well. Now, I'd like to invite Ola to share your thoughts or comments.
Thank you so much, Nobu, and thank you to the IGEP for inviting me. I think it's quite an honor to share the stage with so many influential politicians and policymakers that I have admired for a very long time. So today I want to focus on reflecting on the report that was produced by the IGEP. But before I focus on the specifics of the report, which was divided into practical recommendations and core principles, I do want to highlight that because we're in an international system now that is pretty much comprised of states that are competing to advance their own national interests without much regard for the interest of neighboring states or other states, it's very important that we remember the core principles of international law and the reasons these core principles exist. And so in my reflections today on the document produced by the IGEP, I'm going to focus on the core principles. And I think four of the core principles resonated with me because of how they connect to nuclear politics in today's world. And so the first core principle is that every country has an obligation to comply with the UN Charter in its entirety, including by not committing acts of aggression and by renouncing the use of force for the acquisition of territory. And the reason I think we must really dwell on this core principle is because we are seeing increasingly that states are moving from a position of deterrence to a position of compellence, where they see their nuclear weapons as actually being tools that they could use to invade the territory of other countries and violate their sovereignty, including states that are depository parties or depositories to the NPT. And so I think it's very, very important that we return to this very fundamental principle, because without these principles in place, we'll be existing in an international system that is basically the state of nature, where every state just decides to behave in whatever way they please, and where states that do have nuclear weapons could run the risks of actually having to threaten and use these weapons. And, principles separate us from the rest of the animal kingdom. And so we must be, a species that adheres to principles that actually allow us to coexist as sane individuals. The second principle I want to point out is the adherence to international humanitarian law at all times. Now, I think the TPNW was very important as a treaty because it was able to bring in the understanding of the humanitarian impacts of nuclear weapons into the nuclear deterrence debate. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were very traumatizing examples of what could happen when a nuclear weapon is used. And I think this story had been forgotten over time. And these experiences, the humans that would have to face the experiences of nuclear weapons use, has been forgotten over time. And so a recollection of the fact that we have international humanitarian law with principles that are supposed to respect proportionality, distinction between civilians and military combatants is important. But the second reason I think this principle is important is because we also have other parts of international humanitarian law that are being violated in today's nuclear order in the name of non-proliferation. So, for example, we have the 1977 protocols to the Geneva Conventions of 1964. And these conventions were meant to govern the use of attacks or the use of kinetic means to attack nuclear facilities, especially if these facilities could release dangerous forces. And yet what we are seeing after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, after semi-kinetic attacks on Zaporizhzhia, we still haven't learned the lesson that would, the lessons of the dangers of radioactive release in conflict. And yet, this year, we still saw kinetic attacks on nuclear facilities in Iran. And although, these facilities weren't necessarily facilities that could release radioactivity, the principle of governing the protection of nuclear facilities has to be upheld, because if these principles are eroded, what we would would find in a world where we have more and more states pursuing nuclear energy would be that we would have much more instances of states, neighboring states, that could get into conflict with each other and begin to see nuclear facilities as legitimate targets. And that is not a world that I would want to see arise. Principle 4 of the IGEP paper I thought was also very important, where we must foster a culture of dialogue and cooperation to uphold and reinforce the multilateral non-proliferation regime with the NPT at its center. I think this is a very important principle. We are very, we're very quick to point out how the NPT is the cornerstone treaty of the non-proliferation regime. But many states are also very quick to point out how the TPNW is a disruptive treaty or something that exists in competition with the NPT or something that weakens the NPT. But I think this approach of chastising the TPNW is a very wrong approach. It's a very short-sighted approach. And so this principle of fostering the culture of dialogue and cooperation to uphold this regime with the NPT as its center would actually allow for dialogue between the NPT and the TPNW, understanding that the TPNW actually builds upon Article 6 of the NPT, which calls for nuclear disarmament, just in the same way that the CTBT builds upon nuclear testing, and in the same way that nuclear weapons-free zones build upon regional bans for nuclear weapons. And in this vein, the TPNW has been reaching out to the NPT in many ways. There was the consultative mechanism that was looking at the complementarity between the TPNW and the NPT, which was chaired by Ireland and Thailand for some years. And, TPNW member states have been looking for very pragmatic ways to engage with the NPT to see how these two regimes, each with their unique review cycles, could actually create more space in which nuclear risk reduction dialogue can be held. And so this principle of the culture of dialogue, I think, is extremely important. And the final principle, which asks for states to work to move away from the dependence on nuclear weapons, and that nuclear deterrence should not be the final form of security, I think is the one that resonated the most with me, and I want to reiterate. As someone from the Global South, as a Yoruba man from Nigeria, we do have quite a lot of sayings. And we have one saying that goes, "Pipe ni yóò pẹ́, akololo agbe baba." And what this means is that given enough time, a stammerer would learn how to say the word father. Now, the fact that we have so many nuclear weapons on Earth today, many of them on high alert, built on the principles of deterrence that have to sort of demonstrate the credibility of the threat of potential nuclear use. The fact that we have these systems, it's only the matter of time before one of these weapons is used as a result of intentional use, accident, miscalculation, or miscommunication. And so we really need to evolve away from nuclear deterrence as a form of security or as a final form of security. And we have to return to the understanding that deterrence can only be a temporary solution to manage the competing national security interests of nuclear weapon states. But we always have to remember that the majority of the world do not have nuclear weapons, and any use of nuclear weapons would have catastrophic effects on states that don't have them. So I'll pause here for now, and I'll hand it over to you, and I look forward to the question and answer session.
Thank you very much. That's great. So you, in fact, elaborated the principles much nicer than the other members of the IGEP, actually. But I think it's important thing is about upholding the principle of a humanitarian law and also international law as well. And in particular, among the IGEP members with all different backgrounds, one thing we have a consensus was that we should make Nagasaki as a last city to suffer from a nuclear attack. And then in order to do so, we have to also consider about the humanitarian or inhumane aspect of the weapon at the same time, how we are going to manage the sort of security based upon deterrence as well. So now I would like to ask the panelists to respond some questions on the Q&A chat box. At the same time, I have my own questions. So by combining these questions together, maybe I would like to pitch in a couple of questions to the members of the panel. So to the Rose and Marcelo, both of you are talking about the importance of verification, and either on a nuclear explosive test or nuclear disarmament. And then one of the questions in the chat box is there any way that diversifying CTBT mandate to include verifying nuclear disarmament in addition to the verifying nuclear testing? So from an amateur viewpoint, it seems a bit, it is a bit difficult, make the work of a CTBT be complicated, but still, the importance of verification is something common. So I'd like to ask primarily Marcelo Rose about your thoughts about this, and maybe possibly Ola, you may have some thoughts as well. So please, Rose.
All right, perhaps I'll start, and I'm very keen to hear what Marcela and Ola have to say as well. I will stress, as you just commented, Nobu, that in my experience in arms control and nonproliferation diplomacy, it's good to keep your eye on the prize in a particular negotiation or in a particular convention in terms of how to implement it. So I think the CTBT and the CTBTO does fantastic work in looking forward on how to monitor for nuclear testing. It has really gone from strength to strength over the years in terms of developing the International Monitoring Center. And I commend the current head, Rob Fuller, for his continuing work in that regard. So I think, keep it focused on what it is doing best, which is monitoring for nuclear test explosions. And then think, what further can it do to perhaps concern itself with these more complex problems of monitoring for subcritical experiments? And these are great challenges. But the other thing I wanted to say in this regard is that there have been so many technological innovations and advances now. And here, I've been writing about this for some years, but I really do think, particularly with the advent of artificial intelligence tools that can help us to analyze enormous amounts of data very quickly now and pick out events that may be of concern for further scrutiny. We have some great opportunities, I would say, across the regimes to improve monitoring and verification. So I've been very complimentary of efforts to take a look at new technologies, take a look at how we can use them in monitoring and verification, and I hope that work will continue. I think it deserves a great deal of attention and a great deal of investment by national governments, and also possibly in the world of our new funding community that seems interested in getting into some of these issues, particularly where AI is concerned.
Thank you. I think we are now there is a discussion going on about how to best utilize artificial intelligence for, I think, non-proliferation, in particular, safeguards as well. And maybe possibly blockchain technology could also help to ensure the sort of safe transmission of the information regarding the material control and so forth. So I think that's an important issue. So Marcelo, do you have any thoughts?
So thank you very much. I'd like to borrow from, I would say, the words by Rose, in the sense that the verification of subcritical tests in the CTBT is a challenge. Many countries, like my own, think that the conductions of subcritical tests is a violation of the spirit of the treaty, not the letter in the treaty, because there is no prohibition of subcriticals tests. But we understand that subcritical tests are geared towards the modernization of nuclear weapons. So, in the sense that in our view, they should not be allowed. But how to provide verification to such a test is really a challenge. Yeah. Perhaps now moving to the nuclear disarmament verification, that this is the bottom line of this group that has just been created in the United Nations. I think they will have a very, I would say, daunting program of work. Allow me very, very briefly to mention what is provided for in the preamble in the operative paragraph 6. So this group will the GSTE. So they will have to address nine aspects of nuclear armament verification. Declarations include initial and progress declarations, removal of deployed nuclear warheads, dismantlement and storage of warhead components, conversion of nuclear material with classified characteristics, elimination or reversible conversion of all nuclear weapons-related facilities, placement of nuclear material and facilities under international safeguards, verification of the correctness and completeness of the baseline declaration of nuclear material, and means of delivery of nuclear weapons. Yeah. So perhaps that's the element I'd like to add for the response of that question. Thank you, Nobu. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Ola, I think you are maybe closest to the utilization of emerging technology into the non-proliferation and disarmament. So if you could share, your idea or thoughts on the linkage between the technology and disarmament, non-proliferation.
Oh, thank you so much, Nobu. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to reiterate some of Rose's and Marcelo's points because I think they pretty much covered the ambit there. But definitely on the CTBT and in relation to subcritical tests, I absolutely agree that we need to continue to push for the entrenchment and we need to push against the erosion of the norm against nuclear testing, and the CTBT is doing a fantastic job at that. And perhaps a critical testing, or at least consideration of this, should be something that can be considered in the ambit of the CTBT or as a parallel, a separate process with groups of interested states. With regards to emerging technologies and verification, I think at the moment, the drivers of development of emerging technologies are industry, non-state actors, and of course the interests of corporations that do see profitable uses of these technologies. And governance of these interests is still quite problematic in a sense. And so looking for ways in which we could deploy some emerging technologies in governance of weapon systems, including verification, I don't think a multilateral path is something that is possible yet, just because of how quickly and how diversely, if I can use that word, technologies are evolving. But perhaps within national systems, if governments could actually be much more proactive with developers of technologies and producers of these technologies in their countries to help to come up with possible solutions to verification challenges, and then bring these challenges to a multilateral forum, I think would be the best way to go. But I think there has to be some sort of public-private partnership in this regard, and it has to be something that's done at the state level by interested states that could then drive a multilateral process. I'll pause there for now.
Thank you very much. So, Gustavo, I have a few questions to you, including some from the Q&A section. So you talked about the importance of bridging the different stakeholders, and then talked about maybe interactive dialogue is important. So with your experience as a kind of president of the review conference, how is it possible to incorporate your thoughts into the kind of institutional reform of a review conference? How can we enhance or kind of promote the dialogue with different stakeholders in the review process? And secondly, the question is something related to that, but the Brazil and Norway resolution on the GSTE on the nuclear disarmament verification. It just passed that UNGA, right? So do you think that this verification issue would be a kind of leverage to break the diplomatic impasses within NPT?
Thank you, Nobu. Thank you. On the first question, is something that many member states of the NPT have been discussing, for the last, few years, on how to make the RevCons more engaging among delegations. And based on my experience as the president of the 2022 REPCOM, I of the view that the second and the third week of the REPCOMs, when delegations are meeting at the three main committees, both on disarmament, non-proliferation, regional matters, and then peaceful applications and other issues. I think we have to move from the repetition of national positions that member states issue during the first week in the formal statements. And I believe that it's up to the president and to the chairs of the main committees to push a new approach and to really have a very interactive dialogue, and even to start the negotiations on the different issues already on the second week. And as I say, to avoid that repetition. I think that there is a way to do that. It will be up to, obviously, delegations to see whether they are ready to engage in that dialogue. Dialogue doesn't mean that they will agree on everything. On the contrary, I think that the idea will be for delegations to raise the divergent views and positions on all the important aspects of the treaty. But I think that will make the review conference more meaningful aside of the outcome, because I think just many assess a review conference as a successful or not based on whether that REPCOM managed to get an outcome document by consensus. This is not my view. If you look into the history of the NPT review conferences, in more than half of the occasions, we didn't have outcome documents by consensus. I think just we have just to get another way to measure how useful a REPCOM is, and always I coin the terms how it's not effective, but it's how meaningful a review conference is for the better implementation of all the obligations under the NPT. And I believe that engaging or forcing delegations into that interactive dialogue and real negotiations, it may make the review conference more meaningful, aside of whether we'll manage to get an outcome document by consensus or not. On the second question about the group of experts on verifications on nuclear disarmament, I applaud Brazil and Norway and others have been working on this very important matter for many years, and I think it's due time for the UN as a system to getting engaged, and not only through different group of countries or different initiatives as in the past. Now, obviously, it's going to be very complex. Very few countries have the expertise and the knowledge about nuclear weapons, obviously, and how to, verify the disarmament of those weapons. So I think just the main challenge we'll have is the gap of experience, expertise, and knowledge among the different experts. Those experts coming from the nuclear weapon states, they will have a different array of expertise and tools that the experts coming from the non-nuclear weapon states will lack. So I think just the first few rounds of the discussions of the group of experts will be, as what I mentioned before, is understanding what we mean when we discuss about one particular issue, because we have different understanding. It happened to me as president of the NPT Review Conference when I was discussing with delegations, on detargeting, for example, or just reducing the level of alert of the nuclear arsenals. Nuclear weapon states view that in a different view or understanding from the non-nuclear weapon states. So it's just an example, So I think that this is a very good step forward. But whether it can be replicated on other elements of the just the nuclear disarmament process itself, because obviously verification will be almost, it's important, but it will be the last bit of a long political process. You will need political willingness just to engage into that, but I think just is more than welcome.
Thank you very much. Time flies and we are approaching to the end of the session, but before closing, I maybe would like to ask each panelist a few words if you have any. And on top of that, I really cannot resist asking the Rose this question. You talked about a bit of optimism about reinstating kind of restraints of arms race between United States and Russia, right? So then, but missing piece is, I think, China. So, I think the bilateral sort of restraints over Russia and the United States is important, and it's a very important sort of foundation for the non-proliferation regime and disarmament. But at the same time, some are concerned about the arms build-up, nuclear build-up of China. So how do you incorporate this into the sort of equilibrium of this arms control? So then I also ask the other panelists to pick up maybe some questions from the other Q&A, or you could say something for the last words. So can we start with Rose?
Yes, thank you very much, Nobu. And again, thank you. What an excellent discussion. I've really enjoyed hearing from all my colleagues as well, and I've been taking notes, so thank you very much. Two things. I've long been very open and public in my urging of the United States to think in terms of parallel negotiations with Russia and with China. We obviously have a rapid nuclear buildup going on in China. We don't yet understand exactly why they're modernizing in this way, and we have been very concerned about it in Washington, as U.S. allies have also been very concerned about it, because it has implications. If the United States is facing two nuclear peers, Russia and China, then it has implications for extended deterrence for our allies. And that's a whole nother conversation, I recognize, which is worth another webinar in its own right. But I think that we all have an interest in engaging China. I take heart from the Chinese white paper on arms control, which was very interesting for me. And as an American, it was released on our Thanksgiving Day, which is a major American holiday, last Thursday. So I only got to read it afterwards. But I was actually quite interested that for a change, the Chinese were not shying away from the topic of transparency, for example. And so I thought, although there were many older elements in the white paper, there were some new developments and nuances that I think are indicative that the Chinese are perhaps more open now to engaging in discussions of risk reduction and control of nuclear weapons, not yet interested in limitations. And so I draw that distinction. I drew it in a April 2025 article in Foreign Affairs. So if people are interested in reading of my views in more detail, they're welcome to take them up there. So thank you again, Nobu, for this really excellent opportunity this morning. And from California, I'm up early, but it was well worth it.
Thank you very much. Sorry to keep you wake up really early. So then maybe Marcelo, do you have any final words?
No, thank you very much. I think all of us have in mind that nuclear disarmament has been an elusive goal in the non-proliferation treaty realm. I think this GSC and NGV has not so to say, a silver bullet. I think the main impediment to nuclear disarmament is the political will, the absence of political will for the nuclear weapon states, mostly to comply with their legally binding commitments. But I think this group, Nobu, is perhaps a seed we are throwing Brazil and all in the international community, who has seen a seed into a soil. We hope that to be a fertile soil. And I think this group can perhaps manage to keep the momentum, keep, I'll say, nuclear disarmament in their UN agenda. And it also a platform that can gather representatives of nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states. My final point is I believe that the upcoming RevCon could lend support to this group, but it is not based in any treaty, neither the NPT nor the TPNW, because Brazil and Norway would like also to reach out to nuclear weapons possession countries outside the NPT, and to that end, we have the support of 4 of them. So I will stop here, and again, I would like to echo Rose in the sense that I was very privileged to participate in this group, and I wish all the best for this initiative. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for kind words. Yeah, so now Ola.
Yes, thank you so much, Nobu, and thank you so much to everyone on the panel. This has been extremely enlightening, and I've learned so much from the discussions here, and I really do take away a sense of optimism from the discussions we have here, or at least creative paths to have pragmatic progress in the NPT and in the nuclear order more generally. I really want to reemphasize Ambassador Slavinen's point about, trying to achieve a meaningful REFCON at the NPT. And I also want to highlight that, civil society has noted very positively Ambassador Slavinen's sort of support of the incoming president designate in terms of providing advice and in terms of sharing the very valuable experience from his presidency in 2022. And a little nugget that I want to throw into the debate, and hopefully this can be something that resonates with delegations, is we need to redefine what we think success is at the upcoming RevCon. I think with 2022's RevCon, there was this immense pressure, being that it was supposed to be the 50th anniversary, to produce an outcome document, and that would have been like the only sort of credible measure of success. And I think that pressure actually blinded us to many other ways in which the NPT could be a meaningful checkpoint every 5 years. And so I think going into this next RevCon, we should consider at least some sort of declaration that reaffirms states' commitments, political and legal commitments, to the text of the NPT. At the very minimum, I think states should be able to at least agree to the fact that we still believe in the principles and the letter of this treaty. Normally I would say let's also talk about past commitments from 2000 and 2010, but in this changed security environment, that might be too high a bar. But, at the very least, we should try to have this RevCon reaffirm states' commitments to this treaty. And with that, I would hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And finally, Gustavo, you are the one to conclude.
Oh, thank you. What an honor. I would like just to, just do what my grandfather used to teach me and say, in time of difficulty and problems, go back to the basics. So let's just go back to the basics. At the end of the day, the whole discussions, momentum, and the NPT, it's to avoid the repetition of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Had not been because of that experience, probably would have never had the NPT. Probably we will consider nuclear weapons as any other weapons, so that they're not banned. So I think just we have to, just go. We're talking about human beings, human lives that will be at risk, the threat of being obliterated in an awful way by the thousands or hundreds of thousands. And this is the danger we are facing today, is that for the first time in 20 plus years, there is an erosion of the nuclear taboo that international community developed after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And now, if that taboo is fully eroded, I think just the dike will break, and the consequences will be, no one could imagine the consequences. So I think that we need to go back to the basics, okay, and why we are doing that, this effort. And I will finish my words with the conclusion of the report and saying that nuclear dangers are accelerating with alarming speed, demanding not only sober reflection, but bold, coordinated action. I think I will leave it with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much for saving my kind of efforts to conclude. But so I really appreciate all speakers and also the participants who gave us the questions. And my apology for not being able to address these questions on the chat box. But I hope this discussion was very useful and also meaningful to everybody. Finally, I would like to say in Japanese, the crisis is kiki, two characters. One is real crisis, but the other character sounds that means opportunity. So I think because we are in a crisis, there is a good opportunity for us to create a new idea and create a new mechanism to control the nuclear risks and maybe moving toward the world without nuclear weapons. With this hope, I would like to conclude our. Thank you very much, all excellent panelists, for the discussion, and I appreciate the Japanese Foreign Ministry for supporting this event. So, thank you very much.